Okay, great. Welcome to the August edition of the Africa Share and Discuss webinar series. It's a pleasure to have you connect with us again. And we meet every third Wednesday of the month to learn about teaching strategies and research validated practices that allows you to get the most out of using PhET simulations. We're excited to have you as always. This edition promises to be insightful and should support and improve your teaching of mathematics and science. My name is Shola Olateju, the Africa STEM specialist at PhET Interactive Simulations at the University of Colorado Boulder. I have my colleagues on the call as well, Rebecca Vieira, who is the Associate Director of Global Initiatives, and Zach, who is also somewhere on the call. We also have our very distinguished speaker, who I'm going to introduce shortly. We also would love to know you, so please feel free to write your name, the country you're connecting from, and what you're looking to learn from this session in the chat. And my colleagues as well will pay attention to that and address them as we go. But yes, we love to know you. So please write your name, the country you're connecting from, and something interesting or what you're looking to get out of this session. The session is recorded and we made available to registrants after the session. So you can catch up and see both previous sessions and this session on our YouTube page. For those joining us for the first time, this simulation is brought to you by PhET Interactive Simulation in partnership with the MasterCard Foundation. Just a little about PhET before we dive and introduce our speaker for today. PhET Simulations was founded in 2002 by the Nobel laureate Carl Wyman. The PhET Interactive Simulation project at the University of Colorado Boulder creates free math and science simulation. PhET sims are based on extensive education research and engage students through intuitive game-like environments where students learn through exploration and discovery. The sims emphasize making connection with real-life phenomena and underlying science, helping them to make visual and conceptual model of microscientific concepts accessible to students. There are currently over 190 sims available. A brief housekeeping rule. So today, please feel free while the session is on to write your questions in the question and answer feature here on Zoom. We've saved time towards the end of the call. So while the presentation is on or while our speaker is presenting, we would not be able to take questions during that while the session is on. But we've saved enough time towards the end to address all the questions we might have. Members of the team also will be paying attention to you, both on Facebook or any platform you're joining us from, to pick your questions and address them, whether they are specific to what is being discussed today or they are more about PhET sims generally. A member of the team will be available to respond and point you in the right direction. So please, we also like to welcome those who are joining us from Facebook here. Members of the team are keeping an eye on that. And I cannot stress enough the importance of carrying on the conversation that happens here today to our community on Facebook. So we have a Facebook community that is growing where you have access to members of the team as well as, of course, researchers and some of the speakers who will continue to join and will continue to speak during the session. We can connect, ask questions, and have other members beyond the core team respond and share and collaborate on ideas as well. I mentioned the playlist on YouTube. Please feel free to share, but also connect and catch up on previous recordings. Without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to our special guest for today. Today, we have excited to have Professor Nadaraj Govender with us. Professor Govender is a physics education lecturer at the University of KwaZulu-Natal. His multidisciplinary research focus is in science, physics, information and technology, and indigenous knowledge systems education. He has published chapters in books, journals, and articles in field of science education and presented at many national and international conferences. He has also promoted and supervised PhD and master students in science who have done a couple of research around the use of PhET. So some of the outcomes and learning from that is going to speak to, but also is going to share from his vast experience around his subject domain in physics, his knowledge of ICT, and how all of that applies to the context in Africa. It's a pleasure to have you join us today. I would hand it over now to Professor Govender. Thank you for joining us.
Good evening.
Great, all good.
And welcome to South Africa and to Africa. It's really interesting evening, and the topic today is teachers' beliefs for integrating ICTs in a technologically rich context. I'm trying to move the screen a little bit to the next slide. All right. The overview for the webinar is an introduction, followed by the literature review, and then followed by a short discussion on beliefs, and then the frameworks that we use in our study called beliefs, the use of technology, the BIUT Framework, and then the research, our research that investigated the phenomenon of beliefs in ICT. Then we look at opportunities, and finally recommendations and implications and co-authours, where are we then? And finally, if we have some time, a sample lesson of integrating ICT into lessons. In the introduction, as we're familiar with the current situation in ICT, we're entering an era of the fourth industrial revolution, and we are aware of the increasing role of artificial intelligence and robotics as we move into the future. The concern is that teachers will also have to be on par with the current ICT knowledge. They have to develop skills, and they also have to implement these innovative pedagogies into the classroom. And this is not really happening currently in many areas in the world, especially in underdeveloped countries. Also more important, there are a number of dramatic changes that's happening currently on the world platform. Changes, environmental sustainability, and of course, the global economy that's affecting all of us. So an ICT definitely impact all these changes. So the role of ICT and teachers' belief in the value of ICT is very important in terms of understanding awareness of the importance of the global importance of ICT at the international platform. All educators are expected to be digitally competent in ICT. However, as evidenced in several studies like BIUT, Munia and Jita 2020, ICTs are not even used, even in ICT-rich environments. They're not even used effectively. And imagine spending millions of rands on equipment, and teachers are not sure or are not engaging in the ICT with their learners. Sometimes it can really be a waste of time and money and effort. So there's an expectation from everyone, a rapid shift from non-native digital users, that's like people like me and the quite age in terms of our age and experience, to native young digital users. And as indicated, that is not for teachers, especially primary school teachers. In South Africa, we do have a policy. In 2013 to 2015, we have an e-education strategy that is prepared by the Department of Education, and this serves as a roadmap for achieving the country's ICT integration plan, and I'm sure many countries also have such a plan. Currently, we have about over 16,000 schools nationally that are connected with basic ICT resources. So I think currently now are meeting the basic needs or the barriers that were previously in place. And we are moving forward in actually introducing ICT in most. Of interest to the beliefs of teachers is where information is happening at an international level. And one can actually go to the UNESCO site, UNESCO Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization in ICT. And here we have to achieve the 17 SDG goals. That's the Sustainable Development Goals. And goal number 4 refers to quality education. But interestingly, that ICT all these goals. And so the importance of using ICT in classroom environments and generally in education and in our lives as well. As UNESCO mentioned, that ICT can complement, enrich, and transform for the better as we achieve the goals of Agenda 2030. UNESCO, through the website, provides international efforts to help countries to understand the role such as technology can play to accelerate progress towards the sustainable development, especially goal 4, which is referring to quality education. Now, if you look at the reviews, literature reviews and current problems in using ICT, we find that traditionally or in the last 30 years, there were many barriers. Extrinsic barriers include poor ICT infrastructures, resources, and major limiting factors inhibiting teachers' implementation of ICT by Liu in 2012. Now, surprisingly, these barriers are still a problem, and especially in under-resourced schools, as we experienced South Africa, as by May and again 2016. So the concern is, ICT resources are available, they are still not effectively integrated in, and why is this so? Some of the reasons we can account for involves personal factors, such as subject matter. So usually research have shown that science teachers have a positive attitude towards introduction of ICT compared to maths and English teachers. Also, teaching experience matters. The senior teachers, they are more reluctant to get into the new ICT tools and prefer the traditional teaching methods, which is usually chalk and talk. Sometimes they do use PowerPoint as well. And of course, gender is also part of the problem and associates strongly with beliefs and perceptions teachers held about ICT in education. Additional barriers include a lack of teacher competence, resistance to change, and the perceived ineffectiveness of ICTs to improve student achievement. Studies have also shown that teachers believe a significant role in the way they teach, an impact on their selection of their activities. So the role of beliefs are quite important in changing teachers' action in classroom. Beliefs about the perceived usefulness and the pedagogical compatibility of PhET have a significant effect on teachers' attitudes towards the use of simulation in the classroom. And this has been shown by the study by Stolz and Creek in South Africa 2010. Teachers' beliefs about ICT include technology in society, working life, the way teachers use ICT in their daily life in connecting communication both with the student, teacher competency, access in classrooms. If the ICTs are not available, then teachers lose hope and go back to traditional mode. The nature of the subject, as I mentioned, science teachers have positive attitudes towards the use of ICT, or sometimes the task or associated pedagogies. Also, how children learning outcome to be achieved. All these are influences that affect teachers' belief. Beliefs about the perceived usefulness and the pedagogic compatibility of PhET have a significant effect on teachers' attitudes towards the use of simulations in the classroom. Sorry, the next slide. As we move on, according to the perception, the integration of digital resources was significant and it improved the quality of. Now, these are some recent studies, which is very positive that teachers have a positive attitude of ICT integration in the classroom. The latest study by Bice and Tang 2022 showed teachers with more student-centered beliefs integrated technology more. Findings also revealed the school culture influenced teachers' beliefs about the role of technology. So if the school provide additional resources and training, teachers have a positive belief and will introduce ICT pedagogy in the classroom. Now, teachers' beliefs are a complex phenomenon. In fact, the whole notion of beliefs has been studied for many years and by psychologists and philosophers and historians. But these beliefs are not that easily obtained. So there are two terms that I want to touch upon. One is the term knowledge, and the other is belief. Both are closely related. Knowledge is the cognitive outcome of thought, and it is schematically organized as we have in Bloom's taxonomy. And I think most of us are familiar with Bloom's taxonomy that goes from the lower order skills to the higher order skills. Beliefs so important. Very interesting, a quotation by the Nobel laureate Daniel Kahneman, who was a psychologist, said that for some of our most important beliefs, we have no evidence at all, except that people we love and trust hold these beliefs. Considering how little we know, the confidence we have in our beliefs is preposterous, and it is also essential. So essentially that we all hold a lot of beliefs, and some of them are really false, but we still hold tightly onto them unless, of course, faced with some extreme situations. So we begin to reflect on the situation and change our beliefs. So our brain's way of making sense of and navigating the complex world. It's a shortcut to thinking and tackling the problems we have in our environment. So beliefs as energy cards in modeling and predicting the environment are often held very strongly. In a sense, beliefs are templates for everything and are often essential for survival. So compared to knowledge, belief is the effective outcome, feeling, how does one feel about a particular position, taking a very strong position. Possessing elements of evaluation and judgment, as well as a significant cognitive component. As such, belief is viewed as a knowledge of a sort, as indicated by Pajaras 92. So whilst attempting to understand the world, Pajaras emphasizes that beliefs teachers hold influence their perceptions, which in turn affect their behavior in the classroom. And this is an important connection between studying beliefs, knowing what beliefs are, perceptions begin to change, and how do they judge context in the classroom, and then how behavior changes in classroom. We look at the intrinsic aspects of beliefs and to the curriculum outcomes of Krathwohl's affective domain. So the cognitive domain was Bloom's taxonomy, but Krathwohl added another area. And in this affective domain taxonomy, he focuses on 5 aspects with regards to attitudes, values, interests, and appreciation. And these levels of the affective domain include 1, characterizing, that is where we have a particular worldview onto this worldview, and we begin to take complex situations and we respond according to the values or live by a personal code of behavior. Then there's organizing our belief, the way we look at values, we compare and contrast values and choices, and we begin to prioritize values, and we choose to commit to certain values and behavior. The third level is valuing. We take time and we get motivated to invest our interest or money and energy into a particular belief, and we choose to behave in a certain way. So this begins to identify with the behavior and to commit to it. So when we begin to value, for example, the role of ICTs in classroom and the way it helps students to be motivated. So this is what we mean by valuing. Next one is responding. Responding is a teacher in the classroom finds that the situation begins to change when ICT uses. So how does the teacher respond? Is he also open to learn new ideas? So this level referred to responding. And then the last one is attending. In this case, is largely reflecting to the situation and context and willing to be aware of the setting or situation and being new experiences. So together with the cognitive domains, the affective domains are also important. And these are the micro of factors that are involved in understanding what is a belief. So we move on to an iceberg picture of beliefs. And we move from an internal consciousness to an external consciousness. So the internal consciousness or unconsciousness refers to the identity of the teacher. Who are you? And then it moves on to the beliefs. What do you feel about the use of ICT? How strong do you feel about it in classroom? Is it effective in improving the scores of learners? Is there collaboration amongst learners when you use ICT? And finally, it leads to convictions and then behavior. So there is this link between identity, beliefs, and behavior. So if we want to make changes in behavior, then clearly we have to look at what's happening below the iceberg. So in discussing frameworks, there are a number of frameworks that currently exist in terms of understanding how ICT is used in classroom. And one of the more popular frameworks is the TPAC. It involves the three areas of knowledge: the technological, pedagogical, and content. And largely, what we did largely, we focused on another framework as it referred to, in particular, beliefs. So we conceptualized the beliefs impacting the use of technology, the BIUT framework. And what we did, we borrowed two models from, one is from Hue and Brush model, which is based on the extrinsic and intrinsic factors affecting ICT, and the Vickers framework. And the Vickers framework refers more to the fine details of belief. Now, Vicker was a psychologist, and he worked in an area called appreciation system, which tried to predict the future using an area of knowledge called future studies. And this is the framework that we also try to apply, and we try to combine both these frameworks in trying to understand teachers' beliefs, especially as to relate to ICT in classroom use. So as mentioned, the UN Brush model includes possible external beliefs and internal beliefs, and the Vickers framework refines the influence of specifying a series of judgments, making teachers' beliefs explicit. So this is an important point. We can actually, by looking at the three, we can actually bring out the beliefs to the surface and understand their belief at a deeper level. The BIUT framework identifies and shows the relationship amongst various barriers to ICT use in teaching and context. So in particular, our research is based on beliefs and ICT usage. And in the study that was done by Jagannath 2020, it considered underexplored intrinsic factors that contribute to ICT usage in a technology-rich and context. And this was missing in literature. So when the paper was published, the editor actually did the area of research and also the model that was proposed. So the study explored how teachers' beliefs relate to the use of ICTs, and 3 teachers were selected of natural sciences in a public but well-resourced school for ICT. And during the interaction with teachers, it was found that while ICTs and infrastructure was available, were hesitant to use ICTs in the teaching. And of course, it's a problem because you're spending millions of rand in upgrading the infrastructure. And here, teachers did not know what to do, how to proceed. The study proceeded with semi-structured interviews, class observations, and lesson observations that were conducted over some time to examine the reasons for teachers to use ICT in a technologically rich context. The framework for the study merged. We proposed first the UN Brush. Later, we added the Vickers framework to produce this new model, which is the BIUT model. So here goes the BIUT framework. On the left, we see all those extrinsic, the factors that affect teachers' use of ICT. And we've covered most of them. There's been a lot of research on the extrinsic factors, large resources, the role of the school, assessment, whether ICT is able to assess in ISTEC examinations, and also the subject. Science is often prone to the use of ICT because of the use of a large number of practicals. On the right-hand side, we see the Vickers model, which is teachers' beliefs, and it is based on 3 judgments. So remember, beliefs is referred to the effective outcome, and it's also based on evaluation and judgment. So these 3 judgments have been analyzed further in the study. The first is referred to as. So here, when a teacher walks into the classroom, what does he see? What does he notice? And what does he observe? So in terms of the learners, in terms of the resources available, and in terms of the curriculum outcome. So he looks at the situation and he makes some evaluation, some judgment about whether it's possible to use ICT and to what extent, and how often, and at what level. So that's referred to the reality judgment. Then this value judgment. Yeah, this is one of the most important parts of the belief aspect. And the teacher now think about the norms that should be applied. For example, you want to look at highly rated pedagogy. It looks at the learning outcomes to be achieved. For example, are we going to assess using ICT? And teacher sometimes at the metric, if he's teaching metric, one knows that one has to focus more on other outcomes rather than using ICT to achieve very high marks from learners. Also, the teacher values the role of learners in the classroom. Is he thinking about a learner-centered or a teacher-centered kind of pedagogy? And the last one is the action judgment. Here, now this is important because the teacher makes a decisive decision and to act in the context judgment, the value that is now assessed, whether to move to the role of using ICT in classroom and to what extent. And you also, at the end of using ICT, assess the effectiveness of ICT, or whether you should continue using ICT with the next or with many other lessons. So that is an important part of the Vickers framework. And then, of course, this is supported by the teacher's knowledge and skills. That includes skills that teachers have developed over the years, or specially related skills through workshops, as well as management skills. So these 3 blocks are important for technology integration to be. If some of them are weak, then it's quite difficult to observe outcomes of technology integration, as some barriers might be important in the outcome achieved. So I've covered all the other aspects of judgments. It's quite a lot of judgments. In the interest of time, I want to move on. So we look at example of a teacher in the study. There were 3 teachers, but this is a senior teacher who is about 60 years old. Beliefs regarding using ICTs. So if we take the way he taught his lesson and through interviews, we obtain the 3 kinds of belief indicators. Firstly, a reality judgment. So here, when we interview the teachers, that he believes that that since learning styles differ, he should use different kinds of pedagogies to teach his students. And then he went on, how would you use ICT? He indicated that definitely the aging teacher, he realizes the value of ICT, but he finds the visual aspect particularly useful for learners. So he focused on one aspect of ICT as being quite important to the classroom. Then we look at the value judgment, an aspect of belief. Here, the teacher said that he believed that only the teacher is responsible for providing content knowledge. And also, he found that ICTs cannot be given the responsibility for conceptual development. It's the teacher that actually engages learners in deep thinking. So he believes that ICTs are used only in a supporting role, indicate for visual illustrations. Another aspect of the value judgment and belief by teacher is that the quality of teaching is measured by exam. So therefore, there's a need to focus on the curriculum prescription and the outcomes of the curriculum as demanded, largely in formal examinations. So as a result of that, the teacher often solves problems not using ICT or any of the software that's available. It largely uses chalk and talk and problem solving using past examination papers. The third aspect is action judgment. Here, the belief is that the teacher believes very strongly that traditional methods produce results, and the quality of a teacher is measured by the results produced. So again, you see the barrier to use ICT is because of results, external results, and therefore place on traditional teaching methods rather than those involve the use of ICT. So the finding of the study, one, just within a technology-rich context, extrinsic factors play a minor role because we have already satisfied all those factors in terms of providing software and hardware and resources. But the most important factors were the intrinsic factors, and that was largely linked to beliefs, which plays a major role in teachers' ways of using ICT, especially in science teaching. But of the three judgments that we've come across, the value judgments are the most important because here the teacher places on the nature of teaching and the value of education or the value of ICT in classroom. And these have the largest influence on the way teachers use ICT in classrooms. The other two judgments, the reality judgments and the action judgments, are also influential to some extent in teachers' beliefs. So in effect, I recommend that ICT use in schooling still needs consistent support in cultivating positive ICT-related teacher beliefs, and that further research is needed on intrinsic barriers pertaining to teachers' beliefs using ICTs in technology. So what are the opportunities then for teachers, given that they are and teachers are resistant to use ICT, even given the highly expensive technology? So there are many softwares available, and I've been using PhET since 2002. Even in rural areas, I've taken my computer and a data projector, and with electricity available in the rural areas, able to use PhET successfully with teachers and learners. So I saw the free software as an opportunity to actually use ICT in the classroom, as that wasn't a barrier at all. The cost barrier was limited. Then, of course, there's a lot of free internet. Internet is another problem, but with optic fiber now, the cost of internet has come down. There's also a lot of sponsorship to free internet, as well as in cafes and restaurants. And I know a lot of teachers, especially from the rural areas, use these facilities. Then we have resources on the internet, and that's quite a lot available. But also most important is human factor. There are a lot of friends, mentors, children, and also other teachers. One can tap for support and encouragement, and even ask them to sort of support you along the way in the classroom. So here it has to do with teachers also undergoing regulation. They must be able to also ask for support and help. And we find that even workshops, ongoing courses help teachers to keep up the pace of ICT. What I find quite useful is actually using real life scenarios in your teaching. And I do have an example where I could show in which your integration would be quite exciting for the learners' lives. So these are some of opportunities that are available for teachers that can change their beliefs. But of course, we've got to start at a stepwise level and build the confidence of teachers as we move along. So here's a summary of the possible implications for schools and teachers for the integration of ICT into education. So there's quite a lot of barriers that we addressed already, but I would like to focus on just the last two, which is lack of training. So here, for schools, if there's lack of training, of course, we need schools to provide new devices, bring in modern technologies, and encourage teachers to use new pedagogical approaches. But largely, teachers can prepare themselves by self-training. They can look at online learning and opportunities for training that are offered by different courses and different schools. And also they are knowing how to access resources. So that's what I meant by self-regulation. Then we look at lack of technical support. Here, many schools will have the equipment, it comes in brand new, and then there's no continued support when equipment gets stolen or when equipment breaks down. So here, teachers have to rely on themselves to be able to solve problems in the use of ICT and be able to access available support. So some recommendations and implications. One, teachers need to reflect on their beliefs and shift towards learner-centered ICT-based activities with explicit planning of digital pedagogical approaches. What often I did during pre-service teachers that I asked them clearly in the lesson plan, indicate how you would use ICT explicitly in your lessons. So there was a column or a row in which the pre-service teachers would explicitly plan for digital pedagogy. Also, experienced teachers, it is expected as colleagues, we should work together, should collaborate with inexperienced teachers to design innovative teaching activities. Here, Dr. Jagannath has extended his studies into what we refer to as lesson study, and is involved the whole school in lesson studies where teachers are working with ICTs, and different groups or subject groups of teachers were working and sharing the resources for a whole year. And again, what's important is practice. Teachers may have to start at a very low level, but they must begin to adjust their pedagogical beliefs and allow for guided inquiry approaches where some control is transferred from the teacher to the learner. So it's all about power. Teachers are quite reluctant to let go of the power. So this is what we have to do to change our beliefs, and that the power should be in the hands of the learners. And finally, familiar practices such as small group work, the use of worksheets, task structures such as predict, observe, explain, using PhET simulation, if scenarios, all these different practices will increase teachers' confidence in learner engagement and conceptual development. So there are some recommendations and implications. And then I do have a sample lesson, but I'll stop here in the interest of time. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you for such an amazing presentation. There's so much discussion points from this, but I will start with a quick question before I turn it over to the house. So please, this is a good time. If you have questions, please use the Q&A tool in Zoom to share your question, and Professor Govender will address them. Also, members of the team will be available to respond as you ask them. I also should emphasize at this point that time is never our friend, and these conversations cannot be properly addressed on a 1 hour session when we just gather, which is the sole reason why we have the community on Facebook. So I encourage, if you look into the chat, you're going to see the link drop in a bit. I encourage that if you're not a member of the group, that you please consider joining so that questions that you have can always receive attention, and you can also connect with the larger team. Thank you again, Professor Govender. I'm going to start by some of the points you made. One of what was very instructive for me was extrinsic factors play a very minor role in the use and adoption of ICT in the classroom. But if you put that side by side with the role of what belief is in terms of how the place of expecting, basically what informs our belief around what other people, the people we trust and love, as against having clear evidence of what we hold true. Those we know, those we love and trust, we only know that as because they use or believe this thing. We often basically align our beliefs along those sides. How do we take advantage of those opportunities? You did mention the place of lesson study and all of that, but I think there's an opportunity along those lines. But do you have any thoughts along those lines while we start taking questions from the audience?
Yes, I think you used the quotation by the Nobel laureate about beliefs. Yes, in fact, largely we have to live by the beliefs, our beliefs, even though some of them may be wrong or we're on the wrong track. And as we've indicated, we've seen that teachers have these beliefs, which we can call them traditional beliefs, but we are moving, well, within that time zone, those beliefs were valid. But as we move further with current changes, what we need is teachers not to be in a static situation, but the context of ICT is dynamic. It is changing all the time. So once we satisfy the extrinsic factors and we have the technology, so we're still stuck with teachers now in a position, it's like the horse has bolted already and teachers are left and they're not sure what to do. And as a teacher, we're essentially in the classroom between the learner and teacher, and the teachers want to ensure that he's not ridiculed. You ensure that he's the authority in the classroom or he knows it all phenomena. So in order to, so he has this role to play. So beliefs are also linked to the role that teachers establish or their identity in the classroom. And so learning with new technology about embarrassing moments in the class. So beliefs of teachers to change in the classroom, it's not going to be easy. So this is why I would think in my own learning was that I tried the PhET myself. I looked at somewhere along the line in the early 2000, I heard about PhET, and I actually went down to the site and I tried. It was challenging initially. I tried it out in classrooms a little bit, and with some failure, I tried it again. The sense is that we have to build teachers' confidence slowly, and the traditional beliefs begin to fade away. And I think we have to understand that it's always a changing scenario. Even with new technologies, we're always going to be in a situation of learning something new and find ourselves that we're not yet 100% prepared. And I think we believe that teachers need to sort of develop it. We do not know everything, but we can learn in the current time. So that's where I think the struggle comes in between trying to maintain your confidence as a strong teacher in classroom, as a knowledgeable teacher, and between your changing beliefs in the classroom with the dynamic changes of ICT. It's changing so fast that teachers do not have enough time to catch, and it happens with us as well. So it's a situation, but I think one has to practice in classroom and seek support from colleagues, especially who know about the current situation.
Okay, great. Thank you. Lots of questions. So there's a question here around paperwork. So Catlego PhET, sorry if I pronounced that wrong, says, I know that teachers are overwhelmed by the major paperwork. Are there plans by the universities to assist government to reduce the paperwork teachers are faced with? Something along ICT that assist in general day-to-day running at schools, or ICT solution to cut paperwork. Yeah, so just some thoughts along those lines, like how does the administrative component also influence teacher belief in use, and how can this be opportunities for them to accept if it eliminates some of the challenges or saves time? Are there opportunities on those pathways as well?
Yes, concerning paperwork, yes, I think it's high time we get rid of papers. because of conservation and environmental concerns. I myself used lots of papers while I was lecturing at the university. But the last few years, I promised myself not to print a paper unless I really need it. So thus far, I think I've printed from thousands of pages a month to just possibly one page a month. So the idea is we need to have technologies that support that change. And largely at the university level, we have online teaching. So it has really reduced the kinds of documents that we need to send, a physical document to learners or to parents. So I know most technology-rich schools are actually have got WhatsApp group. They've got a platform where they engage with teachers, which reduce the paperwork. But the paperwork story is again increasing from what I hear from our local schools, where teachers are now asked to keep copious documents of files and assessment, and they're being bogged down by this paperwork. So the department and its officials need to reevaluate the role, the way they examine or the requirements of teachers in terms of documentation they need to keep. Largely use them in electronic files. But the shift is still far behind when it comes to the Department of Education. But we have moved ahead at higher level institutions. So that's concerning paperwork. But on a personal level, I think teachers are developing their own filing system, electronic filing system, and make a promise to themselves to reduce or printing any work unnecessary.
Thank you so much. Mama Kami saying, thank you, Prof, for this presentation. This actually gave me a good and reasonable fact to convince my principal on engaging other teachers and learners in the classroom to use ICT teacher learning environment. There's a question from someone is having struggle asking, I think, Ambassador Charles, if you would like to speak, please raise your virtual hand, and we can grant you access to speak directly if you're unable to type.
Shola, we have actually about 5 or 6 questions in the Q&A that I think we should probably address first.
Okay,
and
great.
Just as a gentle reminder to everyone, we only have about 10 minutes remaining. So if you don't get to your questions, you will definitely receive an email within 24 hours with a recording. And if Professor Govender prefers to give any contact information, we're happy to share that as well. So we have a question from Shakil Acha. Where do we situate the current status of ICT in Africa to UNESCO's open science recommendations? And a second part of that is, can the use of ICT as per the SDGs increase the gap of the digital divide of countries of the South?
As to the first question, I'm not very clear, but largely, so since I'm not very clear about the question, largely that we do have access. UNESCO have websites where teachers can engage in online studies and also support like Microsoft Learning Week. They do have conferences. So if I get the question right, that there is open support software as well, especially also in the areas of teaching. There's a whole lot of document, on ICT electronic software on sustainable development goals, and also on climatic change. And these are already prepared on the UNESCO website. So sorry about that. I'm not very clear about the question, but that is what I can answer up to this point. May you remind me of the second question? Oh, yes, the digital divide.
The use of ICT as per the SDGs increase the gap of the digital divide in countries of the South?
Yes, definitely. What we have now, that the gap, just like all other gender gaps and poverty gap and economy gap, there's a very big divide between the rich and the poor, and it's coming about because of the digital technologies and the cost of the technologies and the internet. So unless we make the cost of internet accessible, or the cost of hardware and software, well, at least the website provides free cost-effective simulation for teachers to use. But otherwise, it is quite expensive for many schools to afford the price of internet, even to sustain it and maintain it. Many of the schools in Africa, even in South Africa, cannot even pay the electricity bill with the increasing cost of energy and electricity. And also we have the big problem with security. We find that in areas which I would refer to as largely the areas where afford to live comfortably, they have good security of the school environment, but largely in township schools, rural schools, the schools are often burgled on a weekly basis. So it becomes expensive for the department as well as for taxpayers to fork out in terms of constantly providing these resources. So this gap begins to widen and widen. And the question is, how can we at least narrow it? The use of cell phones at a lower cost, tablets can help, and the availability of software and links can provide to reduce this gap. But somehow we have to provide training, and that is what's missing. So in order to change from a teacher's perspective, or to get learners engaged, we really need to a lot of training, and it has to be consistent and relevant training. So at the moment, the workshops held by teachers and by schools and so forth, it's just a one-off and it's very general, nothing specific about how teachers can actually go about learning classroom. So I'm afraid the gap is going to increase, and the current climatic change. So the solutions would be, I would think, is that if we merge, I would like to see schools, what I refer to as technology enriched schools, merging with poor or rural schools around, forming a cluster. So in that context, there could be collaboration and sharing of resources, and of course, the learners can move from poor technology resource school to rich cross. But I think we have to make it practical, but it is possible.
Great, thank you so much. Now I see there are a number of other questions, but unfortunately we do have another event coming up on the hour. So I would, just like I said, I will reach out to everyone within 24 hours. Dr. Govender, if you would like to be contacted with those specific questions, feel free to share your contact information with us to include. And I'll hand it back over to you, Shola.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. Again, thanks everyone. Time is never our friend, and unfortunately, we would have to draw the curtain at this point. Please, I know there are still questions we're unable to attend to. We'll make efforts to get back to everyone with responses if we can, where possible. But yeah, feel free to also get across or in touch with the team to ask questions directly, and we'll connect you to the right persons if we're unable to, but members of the team definitely will be able to. If you look into the chat as well now, the link to the group has been dropped. So please, let's continue the conversation there as we wait for the next conversation next month. Would like to thank you again, Professor Govender, for joining us today. Definitely insightful conversation. And looking beyond the very obvious, the extrinsic factors, and looking beneath the veil to see what are the reasons that can hinder technology use is definitely a way to go. And we hope we can continue discussing this further, and also looking at some of the framework that you proposed in your research. Thank you once again. I don't know if you have any parting words before we end.
Thank you very much. I enjoyed the session, and as I said, that beliefs are very difficult to change, but we have to push ahead and afford more resources for our teachers and for our learners, especially those coming from poor and rural environments. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much, everyone, and we'll see you again next month on the third Wednesday at 4 p.m. GMT. Bye for now.